everybody, welcome to week 2 of Aviation Weather Sources. So I wanted to start off this video by just reminding you that when you're submitting your assignments, I really want you guys to be looking for any possible threats to the flight, even if they're not um, something that is directly applicable to your route. If it is presented to you on the standard briefing, then note it and then say why it doesn't apply and move on. So I really want to be seeing a combination of copy pasted or screenshot bits of weather products with your analysis underneath them. And I have a couple PDFs of students who submitted assignments that were doing well in terms of discussing their thought process that I'll be uploading to the course so people can kind of look at what the other students are submitting, and you can all kind of start to, as a group, get a better idea of where we're going with this. And just ask yourself if there's anything relevant you could have possibly looked at there in terms of not just weather, but also possibly NOTAMs or TFRs. Those appear on the standard briefing. So just double check everything and give me a really in-depth analysis so that I know that you're thinking it through. The other thing is that your discussion boards look amazing, and I'm definitely going to be using some of this week's discussion boards in next week's video. So good job on those, guys. A little more housekeeping, really quick. So, as I mentioned in an announcement that I hope most of you saw, then I'm going to be setting up a tour of the NOAA office in Portland for us. Hopefully, I'm going to get details on that this week. So, if you haven't already emailed me and expressed interest in going, please do that so I can get a head count for them of possibly how many students we would have. And this week, our main topic that we're focusing on is going to be PIREPs and in-flight weather information. So I've included some videos for you on those subjects, and I also have a link to an AOPA mini course about cockpit weather, which looks like it could be interesting. And if you do it and submit the course completion certificate to me through the extra credit Dropbox, I'm happy to give you an extra 10 points for your trouble. Just more information never hurt anyone. And also, this week in our bonus section, which again, this doesn't impact your grade, but I found it very interesting, I've got some information about changing trends in how we as an industry access weather. And so the next few slides, I just wanted to point out a few of the more interesting bits of that PDF to you, and if you wanted to look at the entire thing, it's there for you. So in the AOPA 2019 weather survey that I mentioned, there were a few key findings. Among them, they found that in general, the Alaskan pilots, it's a pen. Here we go. Oh, that's better. The Alaskan pilots continue to rely on weather cams and the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit for info. So it's just a very different weather gathering process up there than we have here, and hopefully I'm going to have a pilot who flies in Alaska do a quick recording for us sometime this week or next week and talk about his process of weather collection. So cross your fingers for that, but I found that interesting that they rely on those FAA products, both initially and just before their flight for information, whereas in the lower 48, that's what CONUS means in case you didn't know, in the lower 48, then we have a lot more reliance on apps like ForeFlight and Garmin. And across the board, they found that utilization of the flight services has been in decline. And this is actually one of the more interesting findings. Wow, this highlighter is just not it's not working for me. But so one of the most interesting findings of theirs, for me at least, was that there's this correlation between who is out there submitting PIREPs and how much they deal with weather in their flying. So they're more likely to be submitting PIREPs if they have an instrument rating, an ATP if they're based in Alaska. Um, and so I feel like probably the pilots who fit that demographic are the ones that probably most appreciate PIREPs as well. So that was just a little caught my attention. It makes sense. Another key finding of theirs was that um, there would be very few tears shed for the retirement of a number of what the industry might see as outdated weather products, and some of those that they mention are like textual air mets, no one uses those, um, and weather depiction charts, which the old school version has already been retired. They still have different, um, different ones, but one that I actually thought was interesting was the fact that so many people said they wouldn't mind the Winseloft textual table being retired. But at the same time as saying that, so many people also noted that they use it, either always, frequently, or sometimes before their flights. This is a very significant chunk of pilots who are using the Winseloft, but at the same time are saying that they're not going to be impacted by its removal. And if you look in the latter part of the document, then you'll see some quotes from pilots operating in Alaska, remote areas, who prefer the textual versions of things because the graphical versions don't load in like their uh, spotty internet or whatever. And so that's a good argument in my mind for having it. And other people noted that it's just easy to do a quick skim with your eyes and get a lot of information that way instead of having to manipulate a slider or something. But, so there you go. That was interesting. Um, One thing to think about, to just kind of pack away in your brain if you're looking at this document later, is that there was a very large chunk of pilots, 68% of the pilots that they surveyed were at least 55 years old. And it makes me wonder what type of results they would have gotten had 68% of the pilots they surveyed been less than 55 years old. Because I feel like by having the sample characteristics skewed toward the older portion of our industry population, then they are probably getting a lot more people who are less comfortable with the new technology. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're later looking at their graphs and everything. Um, yeah, and also they had this interesting breakdown of who used what weather products, both for initial flight planning and right before a flight. And again, there was a strong distinction between those pilots flying in Alaska versus those pilots flying in the lower 48. And the Alaskan pilots tended to use those FA weather products. And especially before their flights, like a little ways out, whereas pilots in the lower 48, they tended to gather information from more general sources like apps and websites such as windy.com, which if you haven't checked out windy.com, you totally should because it is a pretty fun website. It's not an official source, but it's still pretty useful. But and that fact was borne out by your initial discussion boards, actually. Most of you tended to say that a couple days before a flight, you checked AccuWeather or the Weather Channel or some equivalent of that. And then as you rolled into a few hours before your flight, now you're hitting up the HIMS tool. You are logging into 1-800-BXBrief.com or aviationweather.gov, and you're starting to look at those official sources. So it's just that one did seem. Oops. And this is one of their graphs that breaks down by age group who is using what resource, and it makes sense. The older population is skewing toward 1-800-WX-BRIEF, with the younger population looking at those aviation apps more. I thought that this was another just interesting thing to think about when you are looking at the people who are using flight service as their primary source for aviation weather. Then the main reason they're doing so is to get that professional opinion, which that makes sense. That's why I do it, and that way you're not missing anything. Nobody is saying that the flight service um, products have amazing graphics or that they are extremely fast or portable, but at least you do have a professional looking with you at a flight, and that is so important. However, when you look at the third-party apps such as ForeFlight or Garmin, etc., etc., then nobody's saying that they are getting help in that decision-making process. But if you look at every other value, then people are happier with the interface, with how comprehensive it is, with the graphics. Look at how much people love those graphics. Those apps look beautiful. Um, they're fast and reliable and so portable. So, so portable. Phones, iPads, everywhere. Um, and so it just makes me wish that we had something in the center of that Venn diagram where we had something that was both professional and beautiful and usable. So anyway, that's all I have for now for you. Again, if you wanted to look through that whole survey, then feel free to check out the bonus area. Otherwise, you have your discussion board due again this week. I'm sorry for the fiasco of not having it unlocked in time for you last week, but I think that I fixed everything, so you shouldn't have any problems now. So you're going to have your discussion board due, your quiz is going to be due, as well as another scenario-based assignments around in-flight weather information, and all of that should be submitted by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. Have a great week.